Most UGC games are gonna fail, and when they do, it won't be because of drama or backlash. They'll fail quietly. You ship the game, a few people try it, and then it just stops getting attention. After building 2 games in Miliastra Wonderland, I finally understand why that happens. Usually the issue isn't with a poor idea. Instead, it's due to some common design errors found in many games that prevent players from ever experiencing the fun. The first one I ran into is simple, but also very detrimental. If your game doesn't have a meaningful way to be played solo, you're asking players to commit before they even know if they like it. When Miliastra Wonderland launched, I was really excited. I had ideas ready before the mode went live, and the moment the servers opened, I jumped straight into building. My first project was Cannon Castle Clash. The idea was straightforward. 2 teams fight over resources, bring them back to their castle, turn them into ammo, and bombard the enemy base. It had different roles and a clear win condition, so in my head it felt like a real competitive game. When I published it, I was really proud of it. I sent the code to friends and talked it up like, I think what I made is really good. But of course, that wasn't the case, otherwise this video wouldn't exist. Because beyond a few plays from my friend when we were in the same Discord call, the game got absolutely no engagement from anyone else. And this is because the game didn't have a single way to be played solo, so with that, most players couldn't really start playing. If you wanted to jump into a real match, you either had to find a group ahead of time or hope matchmaking worked out, which is pretty tough for a game hardly anyone's heard of. This isn't a Miliastra specific issue. Even traditional PvP games deal with this by offering bot matches, tutorials, or sometimes even full campaigns, ways for players to learn and actually enjoy the game on their own first. And that's with those games often having a marketing budget to push an initial wave of players in. Because at the end of the day, players need to feel the controls and the payoff before they're willing to queue up, rely on teammates, or commit to PvP. At the time, I honestly misread the platform. Some of the most popular PvP modes were doing fine without solo options, and I assumed that meant PvP naturally pulls players in. What I didn't fully account for was timing. Those games launched early when there weren't many experiences to choose from. Visibility was free, and population came naturally. By the time I launched, that window was gone. Once a platform has real volume, matchmaking can't save you from zero. It needs players to already exist. Unless you bring an audience with you or get lucky with external exposure, a PvP-only mode isn't going to bootstrap itself. So that was the first real lesson. Every UGC game needs a solo entry point that lets players experience the core loop. Momentum has to be built before matchmaking can do its job. After finally realizing that, I went on trying to solve that by adding a co-op option you could enter on your own. The match would boot up even if you were solo, you'd fight against a scripted enemy castle, and for the first time, Cannon Castle Clash was something you could actually play without a pre-made group. And for a short while, that helped. I started seeing some activity, people were getting in, playing the mode, and the game's popularity count actually reached double digit. But that momentum didn't last. That's when it became clear that the solo entry point wasn't the solution by itself. It was just the first wall. Once players were inside, they were running straight into the next problem. I made the game way too complex. To be clear, complexity itself wasn't the issue. Plenty of great games are complex. The problem is the cost that comes with complexity. Every system you add also adds learning friction, and if the player hits that friction before they hit the fun, they're gone. In my head, everything made sense. Every system's had purpose, with decisions having trade-offs. But that's because I already understood the game. A new player doesn't walk in with that context. They walk in blind. So instead of feeling depth, what they actually feel is confusion. They don't think, wow, there's a lot to explore here. They think, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I went back to fixing. At first, I tried to solve the problem by adding a starting area that was meant to ease player in before the real match began. On paper, that made sense. In practice, what I ended up with was basically a tutorial made out of text. And that was another mistake. No one loads into a game excited to read paragraphs. They're there to play. If the fun of your game only starts after they finish reading, you've already lost a lot of them. What I should have done with Cannon Castle Clash was build a proper tutorial map, something separate with a scripted flow where you introduce one mechanic at a time. Go gather resources, craft the ammo, Defend the castle, level the team up. Simple steps, clear goals, and a planned win at the end to reinforce what the player just learned. The more I thought about it, though, the clearer it became that doing this properly would take a lot of work. Building a fully functional tutorial that actually teaches instead of overwhelming is almost its own project. And by that point, I could feel the game fighting back. A lot of early decisions I'd made were now making improvements harder. That's when I realized it made more sense to step back and take what I'd learned into something new, instead of forcing this project that's completely out of my level to work out. And with that, I started my second UGC project. Because my first project collapsed under its own complexity, I went into the second one with a very clear goal. Make something that's easy to understand the moment you touch it. Every extra system you add isn't just more content, it's also more friction you now have to design around. And I wanted to avoid that entirely. Eventually, after some planning, I decided to build the second project around a simple fantasy: fast progression. That web novel feeling where you start weak, then ramp up so quickly that the power spikes never really stop. To support that, the core loop had to stay clean. So I structured the game into 4 stages. Each stage introduces one new growth rule, and that rule is stronger than the one before it. At the start, growth is very focused. You're given a single skill, and only using that skill makes it stronger. Once you've played with it for a while, the system upgrades it, providing an additional power spike within the stage itself. In the next stage, the rule changes. Power starts coming from kills in general, and your basic attack evolves to match that shift. After you've spent some time with it, that system upgrades too, pushing your range and damage even further. From there, each stage follows the same pattern. One new way to scale, time to get used to it, then a built-in upgrade that turns it up without asking the player to learn anything new. Every stage ends with a wall you're meant to break using the system you just unlocked. That way, the player can never get lost. The whole point was to keep progression exciting without making the player having to stop and think too much. And even with everything simplified, I still leaned hard into guidance. I didn't want players ever have to guess on what to do next. I added a quest bar that always tells you your next objective in plain language. Anything you need to interact with is marked clearly, and when you finish a task, you even get a prompt so you know it's time to check the quest again. That same simplicity carried over into development too. The second project came together much faster, partly because I had more experience, but also because I wasn't fighting my own design anymore. The Resource Center also helped a lot. It let me focus on shaping the game instead of spending most of my time designing the environment. I still did a few optimization passes out of habit, but overall the build process was smooth from start to finish. And when I finished it, I felt confident once again. So I set up what I thought would be the real test. I had a streamer play it. On the surface, things looked good. The streamer cleared the whole run in about 20 minutes, which is exactly what I balanced it for. Progress was steady, nothing broke, and the game was clearly playable from start to finish. So structurally it worked. But watching the playthrough exposed 2 problems that I never really felt during my own testing. These weren't the game is broken type of detrimental issues like before. Instead, they were polished problems. With that being said, I think they still matters, because as Miliastra or any UGC gets more competitive, polish is what separates something that's decent from something people actually remember. The first issue showed up almost immediately. The streamer never really understood what the first system was doing. That first stage is built around a very specific rule. You're supposed to use a particular skill to finish enemies, and that's what makes a scale. But he didn't pick that up. He kept killing enemies with basic attacks, then started talking about how his progression felt slow. From his point of view, the system just wasn't working very well, and it got even clearer later on. Once that skill reaches a certain threshold, it starts triggering an extra explosion hit. I had explained that in 2 different places on the screen, and still, when it happened on stream, he had no idea why. He saw the explosion, but it felt random to him. That was the moment it hit me. I had a severe case of developer bias. When I tested the game, I already knew what I was supposed to be doing. Of course, I paid attention to the quest text. The mechanic felt obvious because I'm the one who made it. But watching someone else play made one thing painfully clear. Information doesn't exist if it doesn't earn the player's attention. As the developer, it's on me to make sure important information actually earns attention when it matters. that means more aggressive UI cues that show up exactly at the moment a mechanic becomes relevant. And when the explosion upgrade activates, that moment needs to clearly announce itself. I want the player to think, oh, I did that, not why is this randomly happening? The second issue was pacing, especially for story delivery. The entire pitch of the game is that web novel progression fantasy, but on stream most of the story just vanished. The game never gave him a reason to slow down. Story sections finished the moment you talked to an NPC, so the optimal way to play was to click through and move on. That's a problem when narrative is part of the experience, so the plan there is to slow things down intentionally. Stronger story beats, clearer transitions, and small pacing buffers that force the player to register what just happened before jumping into the next stage. Since cinematic camera work isn't always an option, the UI and feedback need to carry that weight. Good thing is, there is a dialogue system on Resource Center, which allows me to not have to spend time building my own. Right now, I'm still in the process of implementing these fixes. Once these changes are in, I think the game will finally be in a state where it reflects what I was actually trying to build. After that, I want to move on to the next phase of UGC development, which is something I haven't really tested yet. Marketing. For global, I'm planning to run a retweet giveaway using Amazon gift cards I picked up from the previous Mediastra event, just to see how much visibility I can realistically generate as an individual creator. For the Chinese server, I'm probably going to take a different approach, reach out to a few popular streamers, see if I can get someone to play it, and maybe even put together a short trailer. If you've built UGC before, I'd honestly love to hear how you handled this part. Did marketing actually move the needle for you, or did the platform do most of the work? And if you're just a player, what usually makes you try a new UGC mode? The platform's recommendation? A streamer? A giveaway? Or something else? I'd love to hear what normally makes you check something out. And as always, this has been Steamed Bun X. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.